Thank you, Philly. And one more round of applause for the organizers of this unbelievable event. Thank you for asking me to say a few words. The first thing I'll say is, Robin Camille earlier, you heard her talking about Lolita, the killer whale, who's been held in a swimming pool at the Miami Seaquarium for the past 46 years. She's by herself, and there was an article in a Miami newspaper a few days ago about her plight and about how she's alone in this concrete pool. And it was one of those moments where I had, this feeling of hopelessness, and it got me down. And then I remembered, wait a minute, people are talking about this in the mainstream. It's not just us. Blackfish brought the plight of Lolita into the mainstream, and people who aren't necessarily wired like us are starting to think about the captivity of cetaceans. And then remember Harambe, the gorilla who was shot at the zoo in Cincinnati because a child fell into the pit where this majestic, intelligent social animal was being held captive? Well, when Harambe was killed by the zookeepers, people around the world were talking about whether or not it's ethical to keep animals in zoos in the first place. And who can forget Cecil the lion? Cecil was murdered by a monster named Walter Palmer, I think, in Zimbabwe. And all of a sudden, people all around the world were talking about the ethics of hunting and trophy hunting. Our movement is slowly making its way into the mainstream. People are talking, and we're having victories. We had the Ringling victory, which is historic. And as Philly mentioned, we had a victory thanks to so many people here with the New York Blood Center, which, as you may know, abandoned 66 chimpanzees on islands in Liberia with no food and water. Who does something like that? And the New York Blood Center, as Philly said, gave $6 million toward the care of these chimps. And that's an important victory. And a couple of the things that I learned in this campaign I want to quickly share with you, apart from the obvious things like the importance of perseverance, is that we have to be strategic and we have to be creative. If we had protested at the New York Blood Center and stayed at the New York Blood Center, we wouldn't have had this victory. It's because we went to the homes of the board members, and it's because we went to the corporations that were supporting the Blood Center. That's why we were able to get the Blood Center to fulfill its promise to feed these chimpanzees. We have to be creative. We also have to step out of our comfort zones. We did things in this campaign that probably many of us were uncomfortable doing. We barged into a museum in Philadelphia where one of the board members of the New York Blood Center was giving a talk, and we disrupted her presentation. We ruined it, and that made a difference. We barged into the lobby of the New York Blood Center and occupied it. We barged into the lobby of the MetLife building when they wouldn't be a voice for these chimps. MetLife was their biggest donor of the New York Blood Center. If we step out of our comfort zone, that's where change happens. It happens when we're not doing what's predictable and we're not doing what's comfortable for us and for other people. The last thing I'll say is we have to have short-term goals and long-term goals in our campaigns, because some of our campaigns, like Ringling, take 35 or more years before we see a victory. In the campaign for the chimps, we got 3 different companies, IBM, MetLife, and Citigroup, to issue statements publicly condemning the New York Blood Center for abandoning these chimps. And we celebrated each of those victories, and that helped boost our own morale, and it helped keep us out into the, coming out into the streets. So I just want to thank everyone that helped with that campaign. And lastly, I want to just talk about one of the things that kept us going, and that is camaraderie. It is so important that we continue to support each other, show up at each other's rallies and protests. We're all in this together. I'm really proud to be a part of the New York City animal rights community, and thank you very much for this honor of speaking to you today.